Hello and welcome to East of Ethnia once again. We're doing two videos in 1 week, so this is something new and unusual, but there's news to be responded to. So here we are seeing each other again. What I want to talk about today is to raise some questions and some possibilities about what kind of foreign policy Kamala Harris might pursue if she is elected as President of the United States. There are a couple of reasons why we're talking about her and not the other probable candidate in this year's election. I think one of them is that there is not a whole lot to say about the foreign policy of Donald Trump. He is 100% owned and operated by Russia, and he'll behave in a way that's consistent with that. The other reason is that not only is not a lot very well known about Harris's approach to international policy, but I think there's a great need to know it because she has, I think, at least a 50-50 chance of becoming the next president of the United States. I mean, I would say it's probably better than 50-50 if we make the political calculation that she has the potential to attract new supporters, while Trump probably does not. So in order to talk about possible emerging approaches to United States foreign policy, the first thing that we need to understand is that United States foreign policy does not change a lot, or at least it has not changed a lot in the last 75 or 80 years. There is basically a pattern that was established. You might call it the Cold War pattern that has been followed by most people in charge of foreign policy in the United States with very minor variation. The only real exceptions to this have been minor ones. I mean, one exception to it was pioneered by Richard Nixon, who opened up dialogue and contact with China, and in doing so, probably introduced some Chinese policymakers to the idea of multipolarity, which has proven so influential in their policymaking recently. And the other big departure was pioneered by Jimmy Carter when Patricia Darien was his Assistant Secretary of State to bring human rights in as a principal consideration of U.S. foreign policy. We could say that's been followed inconsistently in the time since Carter introduced it. And what can we say about Joe Biden as president? I mean, I think the first thing that we want to observe is that Joe Biden came into the presidency as probably the most experienced person in foreign policy ever to hold the presidency of the United States. I mean, he had spent 30 years as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He had spent 8 years as vice president of the United States under Obama. He was very much integrated into international policy and discussion networks, knew a lot of the actors personally. So you would expect him to be knowledgeable, and he was knowledgeable. And in many cases, it's possible to say that Biden was very skillful in maintaining the alliance of the United States and Europe in defense of Ukraine. After the invasion of Ukraine, he was able to do this pretty consistently. I mean, with only minor defections, really only Hungary. Slovakia was moving out of the coalition for a while, but they seem to have lost their taste for that. And without bringing the United States or Europe into direct confrontation with Russia, which was always the greatest danger. You could probably make the argument that the commitment of the West could have been larger scale or more sustained than it was. This is probably true. It could be, and it probably will be over the next year or so. But having said that, with all that experience and with all of that knowledge, Biden was a disappointment to many people. I think partly because he is a representative of a different period. I talked about this post-World War II consensus in American foreign policy, and he is a participant of that consensus. He was a person whose views of the world were structured and informed by the kinds of relations and understandings that operated in the Cold War, and they didn't translate well to the post-Cold War environment or to the post-Cold War environment now, in which we see many more complex centers of power and complex questions defining policy. I mean, he's been particularly disappointing, I think, to many people concerned with the part of the world that my research is focused on in Southeast Europe. I mean, both in the sense that people expected that he would make an initiative early on in his administration to try to move toward a new constitutional resolution for Bosnia and Herzegovina to replace the Dayton arrangement that has been so unsatisfying. And a kind of start was made, but it was not followed up. The initiative was handed over to Germany and to a German high representative who proved fairly ineffectual. People were also expecting that he might move foreign policy away from the alignment with Serbia in the conflict between Serbia and Kosovo that had been introduced by Donald Trump, but he doesn't appear to have made that change. So Biden leaves office with a wealth of experience, with a record that is partly good and partly disappointing. I mean, the first thing we have to say about Kamala Harris is that she is not as experienced or enmeshed in foreign policy as Biden was when he became president. This has been addressed somewhat in the sense that she has become the United States principal contact person for Europe during her time as vice president. Her main foreign policy activity when she was a member of the United States Senate was as part of a bipartisan group of 3 senators trying to draw attention and raise concern about the genocidal violence against Uyghurs in China. But here are some things that I think we can say we can extrapolate from other parts of her experience that might give an indication of where she might be directing foreign policy. First of all, this is a person who has an international orientation that has been with her from birth. I mean, this is something that I think you might expect from a person who was born in California to a father who is Jamaican and to a mother who is Indian and who grew up in international communities. You may be hearing in the near future a lot of references to her line about a coconut tree, that people do not fall from coconut trees, but operate in sets of circumstances that they do not choose. People will make a little bit of fun of it, but it's a pretty accurate representation, I think, of the worldview that comes from this origin. And I think that it's going to resonate with a lot of people who are from international families or have otherwise international orientations. Second, we can talk about things that have been her focus in policy. She has been mainly concerned with domestic policy during her political career, but as a prosecutor, her principal concern was with crime. And although there are instances in which she took a kind of tough on crime approach, some people would argue in some cases like prosecution of offenses for possession of marijuana, maybe even an excessively tough on crime approach. But for the most part, that was not her approach. She is a lifelong opponent of the death penalty. She has consistently made the argument that the way to address crime is not to be tough on crime, but to be smart on crime. That people with dependable income, with reliable supply of food, with decent housing and education, are less inclined to commit crime. If you want to reduce the rate of crime, increase the rate of employment, look carefully at issues of social welfare, and especially the welfare of children. Now, this is an argument, I bring it up, or argument about crime, because it's the argument that in foreign policy sort of falls under the general umbrella of human security, that states in the world become more secure if people in those states are more secure. And this is something that derives not only from questions that are traditionally understood as defense questions, but from social questions as well. And I think that also, if you look at the circumstances by which she was able to rise to the position that she is in now, and to the position that she's likely to be elected to, and what she had to oppose in order to get to the point where she can be elected president. She has reason to be invested in democracy. Biden started off his presidency with an approach to foreign policy that promised to put a strong emphasis on democracy. There is a less strong emphasis now as other concerns came to the fore, but she has a very strong motivation to be advancing these questions in the world. So these are good signs, I think, for people concerned with the parts of the world that we're concerned with, and with the questions that we're concerned with. At the same time, we have to make a couple of reservations to what's just being said. One thing that we can say about Harris as a kind of constraint on her freedom is she's going to be operating with, especially at the beginning, a very strong loyalty to to Biden and a strong reliance on the people that Biden relied on. This will continue for a time until she possibly feels secure enough to bring in some more independent thinking and some members of her own team. A second thing that we're able to see, especially during her time as Attorney General in California, is that she is a cautious person. She has a very, very high aversion to risk and is not likely to enter into conflicts and disputes unless she thinks that there is a very good chance of coming out of them having achieved the goals with which she came in. So it probably means that she's not going to be making a lot of very, very bold or dramatic measures unless she thinks there's a high probability of success. I'll say this is probably not a bad thing in the sense that those kinds of measures are the ones most likely to backfire and to put people in danger. So on balance, what can we expect from foreign policy under a President Harris? If we look at her background and at the things that have been priorities for her in other fields, there may be some good and positive changes, and there may be some room for addressing some of the things that have been disappointing in the past several years, and as Biden has been president. But if so, they're going to be limited and they're going to be slow. That's my thought on foreign policy for the day. Thank you for your time and for your attention. See you next time.